On today's program, we're going to get a rare opportunity to fly on an aircraft that many people in World War II flew to secure the freedom for our country. It's a B-17, and we're going to get that opportunity to do it with a couple people from Northwest Ohio. With me is Ed Likes from Bryan, and Ed, we've been on the program before. We've talked about some of these planes. We've seen some of the planes sitting like the B-17 behind us, but we've never flown on one together, and we're going to get that opportunity to do that today.
Yes, we are, Bill. We're going to get this opportunity today to fly with the Collings Foundation and their B-17, one of about 10 or 12 in the world in flying condition. And so it's going to be a rare opportunity, and it should be a neat flight from here to Akron.
Well, we're in Lima, Ohio today, and we're going to be flying to Akron. There were about how many of the B-17s made? What, around 12,000?
I would say, Bill, that there was probably around 12,000 B-17s built during World War II. Okay. And today to see one in the air is a very rare occurrence. As you already said, there's only probably about 10 to 12 of these airplanes in the entire world in flying condition.
So we're going to get an opportunity to do that. This plane was developed in the late 30s, as I recall, and they started building them. The one we're seeing is one of the later ones that was built that had a lot of the modifications, and people who watch planes develop notice that they incorporate different upgrades through the years, and this is one of those ones that got a lot of the upgrades.
Yes, this is a G model B-17. It's got the chin turret with twin 50s up front. That was one of the things that they incorporated versus the earlier B-17 models. So yeah, this is one of the last variants that was built as a B-17.
Now, what I like here today is we're not only seeing a B-17, but we're seeing a B-25 and a B-24, and we're seeing some other classic warbirds too. The Collins Foundation, as I understand, tries to preserve these planes so that people get to see the history of what people were flying in those years to make sure our country was free.
Yes, that's right, Bill. Of course, I'm a member of the Collings Foundation. I've done my small part to try and keep these airplanes flying, and the Collings Foundation is a unique organization in the fact that they're based in Stowe, Massachusetts, and they barnstorm about 110 cities throughout the United States every year with a B-17, a B-24, a B-25, and a P-51 Mustang. And it gives a person that maybe doesn't know a lot about the history of World War II a chance to see these airplanes up close and be able to fly in them or tour in them and get an education in the process as to what these airplanes look like, what they sound like. So it's a very unique organization and a very fine organization that I'm proud to support.
Well, what's interesting are people are taking tours and going through the planes to actually see some of the things inside and see what the conditions were like. And these weren't luxury planes; they weren't built for that.
No, these planes were built for war. They were combat aircraft, and B-17 during World War II had a crew of 10, and unfortunately, if a B-17 got shot down and there was no survivors, you lost 10 good men every time a B-17 would get shot down that nobody could bail out of.
Yeah, and these planes could fly faster than some of the planes before them?
Yes, a B-17 could do probably 215, besides about 220 mile an hour in cruise, possibly a top speed of 280 or so. It really didn't come into its own until the P-51 Mustang was able to escort the B-17 to a target and back. So when the P-51 came along, then they had the little friendlies, as they called the P-51.
And that's another plane that is also here, is that not right?
It's here right now. I don't see it, but yes, it is here. Yes.
Okay. So that was an escort primarily for that?
B-51 was a fighter escort for the B-17s. Absolutely.
All right. Probably the thing that many people notice about the warbirds is nose art, and there's always different pictures on there. That really separates the planes from just a bunch that are lined up and ready to go.
Yeah, the nose art on any of your what we call warbirds, that was sort of a morale booster that the crew would say pick their sweetheart or their wife, and possibly and someone would paint a likeness of that normally a girl on the front of the airplane, and they would give some kind of a name. It was a morale booster during World War II.
One of the other people on this trip here in Northwest Ohio that we're going to be riding with on this B-17 is Marty Potts from Bryan. And Marty, you've flown on this B-17 before.
Yep, Ed and I have flown on it several times. I'd say this would probably be my 9th flight on a B-17.
Oh, wow. All right. Why do you like flying on a B-17 so much?
Oh, it's history. It's history. Once you fly in a B-17, your life changed forever, because it just gives you a brief glimpse back to World War II as to what these kids went through, only we're flying for pleasure. They were flying to stay alive and to complete their mission. So it's just part of history, and I'm just so thankful that Connellings Foundation does this.
Have you met any of the former people who were crew members of a B-17 when you've been out here seeing some of these folks?
Absolutely. In fact, we flew from Valparaiso, Indiana, a number of years ago, down to Terre Haute, Indiana, and I helped a gentleman up into the fuselage of the 17, and I asked him where he wanted to sit, and he said, "Well, I want to sit at the navigator's desk." And I said, "All right." So I took him up there and sat him down, got him all buckled in. And when we took off, I noticed that he had his head tipped back and he had his eyes closed, and I looked at Ed and I said, "How in the world can this guy sleep during a flight in a B-17?" And so we got to Terre Haute, Indiana, and I helped him off of the airplane. We were walking up to the terminal, and I said, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" And he said, "Of course." And I said, "How in the world can you fall asleep flying in a B-17? And he said, "Oh, young man," he said, "I wasn't sleeping." He said, "I had my head tipped back with my eyes closed," and he said, "I could hear and see all of the guys." He said, "Once those engines started up," he said, "all those memories came back." And he said, "I could see him laying on the floor playing cards." He said, "I could smell the cigarette smoke." And he said, "It just brought all of that back." And he said, "So no, I wasn't asleep." Well, just that was enough to make that flight completely worthwhile, just hearing the stories.
Now, is the B-17 the only warbird you've flown in?
No, we have flown on the B-25. We've flown on the B-24 several times. And the B-24, it's the only actual B-24 flying in the whole world. So, out of the thousands that were made.
So these are really classic special planes.
Absolutely, absolutely. They're just phenomenal. I'm so thankful for Connellings for doing what they do.
Now, you mentioned something before about you were wondering how he could sleep on that, and he really wasn't. I understand that it's a little noisier in the flight than what we might be used to.
It is. It's not as noisy on the 17 or the 24 as it is on the B-25. The B-25 is is really loud. And how these young, I think we got some Bs that want to play B-17s. How these young guys kept from going deaf is beyond me. But like I say, the 17 and the 24 isn't that bad at all.
Now, when they fly, they all fly together?
Right. Mm-hmm. They usually do. The 17 usually takes off first, or vice versa, the B-25. Because the B-24 is probably faster than the B-17, so they want them all to land in succession, so that's why they do it.
One of the things that the Connellings Foundation does with these planes is it provides the opportunity for people to take rides as well. So people can actually get a ride on some of these planes.
Absolutely. They can ride on every one of them. It's a little bit costly, but when you figure that you're flying in actual history, it's worth every single. And like I say, it changes your whole attitude about these airplanes.
Well, I'm looking forward to flying today on the
We're
B-17.
looking forward to having you fly because you'll never be the same. You'll remember this till the day that you are no longer here.
Well, I'm looking forward to it too, Marty. So hold tight. When we come back, we will be making our way to Akron. We had an incredible experience riding on the B-17, and to give you a tour of the plane, first off, we started when we went in the back part of the plane, the waist gunners area, and there's two 50 caliber guns there. There's a total of 12 on the plane, of course, to protect itself and make sure that it gets the mission done. What I will tell you is there's not a lot of room on the plane, and for a number of us walking back and forth, which was great to be able to do while the plane was in flight, we had to be very careful about how we got around, and there wasn't a lot of space. Obviously, these flights were for much younger people who were used to getting around and had to do it quickly, and for some of us, it's a little bit more of a challenge. But making our way forward, we came to the radio compartment. That's the radio room was where we, Marty and Ed and I sat on the flight. And of course, I felt right at home in a radio room, so I didn't have any trouble with that. This is a restored B-17, so you see radios there that were used for flights before, and it's incredible the kinds of things that they were able to do and communicate with. One of the really nice features of the radio room is the top is taken off so that it's open, and that made it really a cooler flight for us. Otherwise, it had been really, really warm in the plane that day. And we were able to stick our head out, and that makes it about a 160 mile per hour convertible for us. But we got to see the tail from outside, just inside the plane while we were flying along. That was pretty cool. To move forward, to get to the front part of the plane, there's the bomb bay area, which obviously they used to keep Germany from being able to produce so many goods and be able to continue the war effort. So there are replicas in there. And let me tell you, the walkway is very small and the passageway is very small, and it can be a challenge for some of us a little bit more than others to get through there. But once you get towards the front, there's the flight deck where the pilots are, and making sure that the plane is flying as it should, and watching for all the things that they do. And underneath that flight deck area, there is a place that you can go under and through. And when you do, you come out into the nose of the aircraft. The nose of the aircraft had some real significant pieces to it. Aside from the guns that protected the plane, on the right-hand side there is a table, and that's where the navigator would be. And of course, making sure that the plane was on track and where it needed to be. In the front of the nose was the bombardier's position, and had a chair there for him. And they had one of the special secrets that were held in high regard during World War II, and that was the Norden bomb sight that was so incredibly accurate and It was quite a secret, and in fact, there were some people from Northwest Ohio who went to the plant to manufacture those, and they were sworn to secrecy and made sure that that was kept under wraps, so the enemies didn't have any access to that. When you're on that flight and you're looking at all of that, you get a real appreciation for the people who were in the air and the people who were a part of all of this to bring the war to an end and to provide freedom for all of us. And so many people gave their lives in order to make sure that we could be free and that the war effort would end and we could be victorious. And we owe them a real debt of gratitude for what they did with the materials that they had. All right, we completed our flight on the B17, and Ed, the first thing I noticed, it's loud.
Yes, your B17 it's loud inside. It's also cramped. I think you found that out, Bill.
Well, I was going to go there too, but the first thing is I knew right away we weren't going to do any interviews in there. I could barely understand. I had to do some signs to let you know I needed this or that, but it's not terribly loud. Like you could yell in there if you needed to, but. Yeah. But we weren't going to do any interviewing during there. The other thing I noticed is, all the movies I've ever seen, you had plenty of room for all those guys. But in reality, the crew on there didn't have a whole lot of room to work with.
No, a crew of 10 during World War II, and we didn't even have really the ammo boxes on board, or if they did, they didn't have spent shell casings and stuff like that. So, yeah, the inside of a B-17 with 10 guys in there, all the equipment, bombs, guns, ammo, yeah, it's cramped.
Yeah, all the armaments and everything that are in there. Now, 10 crew members, what did the 10 crew members do? Do you know?
I got to try and work my way forward. The nose would be where the bombardier and navigator would be. Then you had
now is that the one where they've got like a sight in there and they'd be right in underneath the pilot?
Yes, that'd be right underneath the pilot, out in the nose of a B-17.
So you can look out at all the country like we did, and we could see everything going on.
Absolutely, as long as you weren't being shot at.
Well, yeah, you didn't. Happen.
And then you had the pilot, co-pilot. Then you had top turret gunner. Then you would have a radio man.
That was the radio room. That's where we were when we took off and landed.
Yeah, that would be right behind the bomb bay. Okay. And then you had.
I thought it was appropriate that I'm in the radio room.
You were in the. Bill's in the radio room. That was a good place for Bill to be at.
I think so too. They didn't give me a microphone just so everybody can feel a lot more sure.
Hear you anyhow, Bill.
No, probably not.
But and then you had 2 waist gunners and a tail gunner. I wasn't keeping track. I don't know whether I had. That's close to being a full crew right there.
Well, we got to see where the various guns were located, and those were for protection for the crew, in case they were attacked, and a B-17 might have different cargoes depending upon what their mission was.
Well, they might have different types of bombs. Depending on what the mission was. There was Did
they ever haul cargo or troops or that kind of thing?
I was going to say that, Bill. There's a B-17E, which is altogether a much earlier model than this, coming together out in Illinois. And when that's completed, they converted that into a cargo hauler. And so it hauled cargo. Also, it hauled people that were wounded. Very few B-17s were converted that way, but I know that there was a few of them that were that way. Most of them were carrying bombs to a target.
Now, one of the things I found very unique is that the top of the plane was open. We could look out during the flight and actually look back at the tail.
There was a that's where there was another gun was back there.
Okay.
Where that top hatch was at.
Well, it sure felt good. It gave us a little bit of air through
peacetime. I've always said to anyone that does this that it gives you a glimpse into the past, into what history was, and it makes you appreciate what those guys 75 years ago went through, and the sacrifices that they made in our behalf of freedom today.
I think that's entirely what a lot of this is all about. Now, was the cabin hot when it was hot and cold when it was cold? Is that the idea?
Yes, I mean when a B17 would be flying, say at 25,000 feet, these guys had on heated suits, and even then, it was still cold. I mean, it was a crude way to try and keep the crew members warm, but it was no picnic in World War II. And what we do in peacetime, it just gives us a glimpse into the past of what they went through. We're not being shot at and that type of thing, but it does give you a glimpse into the history and a little bit of an idea of what it was like flying in these things 75 years ago.
Well, Marty, you also experienced this. This is not your first time, so you knew what to expect. How was this ride different maybe than other rides you've had?
Well, with the weather, we had pretty well overcast skies, and with the overcast skies, it's going to be a little bit bumpier because of the way that the air pockets are. So, I tried to take some video during that, and it's probably not very good video. It kind of jumps around a little bit because it was a little bumpier. I mean, it wasn't bad. No. It just was a little bumpier. No, it wasn't bad, but it does make a difference depending on the cloud cover or clear skies or whatever. We've actually ridden on the 17 and the B24 when it was just smooth as silk. But that's what happens when you fly.
You've ridden on the B17. What else have you ridden on?
The B24 and the B25.
All right. Do you have any other plans for any other aircraft you'd like to take a ride on yet?
Well, just any. Any of the warbirds. I just love them. It's an honor and a thrill for me to do it, simply because of who flew them during World War II.
On a related note, the Memphis Belle has been the new display that's been refurbished, and you and Ed were both down there to see that, and that's got to be a great thing to see brought back to life again.
Well, I'll tell you, my son and I, when it was on Mud Island, Sherry and my son and I went down to see the Memphis Belle before she was restored. And the guy actually opened it up and let Pete and I climb up in the cockpit. And to sit in such an iconic World War II aircraft was just an amazing thing. And now, after her restoration by the Air Force Museum, she is just absolutely beautiful, just like she was when she rolled off the assembly line. And I'm just so glad that there's people that actually do that, because history needs to be remembered.
Are there other warbirds around that still need to be restored, that are being found, that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's a B-17 being built in Urbana. There's a B-17 being built in what Ed said in Illinois. But there's all over the country. There's actually aircraft being restored from World War II, even as far down as Australia. They're being restored. So these aircraft are very rare because there's just so few of them left. But the ones that are done meticulously.
Ed, again, we want to thank the Collings Foundation for what they do to make sure that there are these flying museums, the Wings of Freedom still flying, and we want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to actually get a chance to fly on one and see what it was like.
Well, both you and Marty are welcome. I've always enjoyed taking people along with me. You're a first-timer, Bill, and I hope I know you appreciated the experience. I'm a member of the Collings Foundation, have been since 2011. This is about my 7th time now flying with the Collings Foundation. They're a tremendous organization. I highly recommend anyone that's got an interest in aircraft and in the history to think about joining the Collings Foundation. You can find them. Google Collings Foundation, you'll find out all about them. They tour about 110 cities, all make a wide circle all across the United States with a B17, a B24, B25, and a P51 Mustang. I've gotten to fly in all of them at one time or another, and they give people a chance to either fly in them for a fee, or you can tour them for about $15 and get inside and do a walkthrough. They teach history. It's a living, breathing history organization.
All right, Ed, and do you have any final words for us today?
I do, and people that know me know that I want to keep these warbirds flying, so keep them flying.
Well, we're in Akron, Ohio, as we finished our flight on the B-17. It may not be exactly Northwest Ohio, but we've got a couple of guys from Northwest Ohio who have flown today a B-17 from Lima to Akron, and we hope you enjoyed watching this from Northwest Ohio Community Television.